Arrival at Zenthari Academy. The shuttle descended through the emerald-hued atmosphere of Zenthari Prime, its sleek black hull cutting a path through the shimmering clouds. Cadet Mara Kim pressed her hand against the viewport, watching the alien city emerge beneath her. Spiraling towers made of living crystal, walkways suspended in midair, and starships docking like dragonflies along translucent petals of landing pads. First human at the Academy, she thought, both proud and a little nauseous. The Galactic Concord's flagship school, Zenthari Interstellar Academy, had trained generations of diplomats, scientists, and peacekeepers. But this year, for the first time in history, they'd opened their doors to a human. A cautious experiment. Mara had been selected after grueling psychological screenings, diplomatic grooming, and months of cross-cultural etiquette training. She was here to represent Earth. No pressure. The shuttle hissed as it landed. A ramp unfolded like a tongue, and she stepped onto it in her dark blue cadet uniform, shoulders squared. Waiting for her at the base was a serpentine administrator with translucent scales and several floating data slates spinning around its head. "Cadet Mara Kim," it intoned in a warbled accent, "welcome. I am Registrar 12. Please proceed to administrative integration." Inside the central atrium, students of every imaginable shape and texture floated, glided, slithered, or walked past her. Some glanced at her curiously. Others avoided eye contact. A trio of avian scholars chirped softly, their feathers ruffling with unease. Mara kept moving, hiding the tightness in her stomach. At a glowing console, Registrar 12 guided her through her academic onboarding. Cultural anthropology. Approved. Linguistics of the Galactic Core. Approved. Cross-species ethics. Approved. Galactic history. The registrar paused. Its floating slates rotated faster. A red warning light flashed. Denied. Mara blinked. Excuse me. You may not enroll in galactic history without assignment of a certified conflict counselor. What? Why? It's a class. On history. The registrar's tone shifted, as if explaining something to a small, unpredictable predator. Due to historical data concerning human neurological response to violent stimuli, particularly in educational settings, you must be monitored to ensure emotional stabilization and interspecies safety. Mara folded her arms. Because of our history. That's the point of the class. Precisely. That is why you require supervision. This has to be a joke, she thought. But there was no humor in the glowing red letters across the screen. Within the hour, Mara was escorted to the psychosocial monitoring wing, where her assigned counselor awaited. He was taller than her, pale and jelly-limbed, with 2 luminous eye clusters and a voice like a waterfall echoing through glass. "I am Dr. the Rex," he said, clasping his tentacles together. "Your assigned conflict counselor for all historical instruction and relevant simulations. I specialize in Terran neural empathy mapping and high-stress de-escalation." Mara stared. "You've studied humans?" "Intensively. I read 28 accounts of your Second World War. Disturbing, but deeply insightful." "Great," she muttered. As they walked toward the history wing, Mara noticed how even the layout changed. Wide spaces, more light, more cameras. "They really think I'm dangerous?" she asked. "Not dangerous. Unpredictable. The galactic community has categorized humans as adaptive aggressives, a species that can normalize conflict as easily as it avoids it." Mara exhaled through her nose. "We're not proud of our wars." The Rex turned one eye cluster to her. "And yet you remember them all. Name them. Study them. Reenact them. Celebrate survivors as heroes." "We learn from them." The Rex considered this. "That is the part the others fear most, that your species learns from violence and improves." They reached the entrance of the lecture hall. Above the door glowed a multilingual disclaimer. "Attention! Human presence monitored. Emotional response protocols in effect." Mara's fists clenched at her sides. The Rex placed a gentle tentacle on her shoulder. "The galaxy has never seen a species quite like yours. That is why you're here. But understanding comes with precautions." Mara squared her shoulders and stepped inside. She wasn't here to scare anyone. She was here to learn. To show that humanity was more than the sum of its wars. Even if, apparently, they needed a babysitter to do it. The problem with human history. The lecture hall was vast, a honeycomb dome woven from threads of bioluminescent silk. Holographic timelines shimmered midair, wrapping around the chamber like constellations. Dozens of students had already taken their seats, or whatever passed for seats in their species. Some levitated. Some curled. One student sat inside a floating mineral egg that pulsated with light. Mara Kim walked in with Dr. the Rex a step behind. Her arrival caused an instant ripple. A serpentine being coiled tighter. A plantoid species released a spurt of pollen, nervous reaction. A creature made entirely of feathers tilted its head, observing her like prey it couldn't quite classify. Professor YYL, a 10-foot crystalline being with refracting limbs and a voice like wind chimes in a storm, addressed the class without turning. Welcome to Galactic History 104, Development of Early Conflict Across Civilizations. Mara took her assigned seat, separate from the main group, near a cluster of embedded sensors. The Rex floated beside her, monitoring heart rate, micro-expressions, and vocal tone. YYL continued. Before our modern age of consensus, many species passed through stages of scarcity, tribalism, and conflict. This course will examine the sociological evolution of such behaviors, and how different species transcended them. A few students glanced sideways at Mara. YYL activated the first projection, a calm blue world. The Thrali resolved early territorial disputes through pheromonic language. Entire wars were prevented with scent mediation. Another projection, a gas giant. The Bzan formed hive councils where internal stress was redistributed through song. Violence was simply off-key. Mara raised a brow. Seriously? Professor YYL paused. Yes, Cadet Kim. Now, would you care to share Earth's early conflict resolution strategies? Mara cleared her throat. Sure. Let's see, pre-civilization, we had small nomadic tribes. Conflict over food or territory usually ended in skirmishes. Sometimes mutual destruction. Over time, that scaled up into empires and organized warfare. The Peloponnesian War was one of the earliest recorded prolonged conflicts, Athens versus Sparta, roughly 27 years. The room fell quiet. A student with a soft gelatinous body pulsed a deep purple, an alien equivalent of alarm. Another student, the insectoid Cielinar, clicked his mandibles. 27 planetary cycles? Continuous. Well, with some breaks, Mara said. But yeah, it was brutal. Lots of betrayals, sieges, plagues. But it taught us about power dynamics and the fragility of alliances. You say this with pride, Cielinar said sharply. No. With perspective, she shot back. We're not proud of the bloodshed. But pretending it didn't happen doesn't make us better. Understanding it does. Dr. Therex's tentacles hovered just slightly closer to her shoulder. Professor YYL, unfazed, moved on. Let us now examine technological escalations. When did your species weaponize its environment beyond immediate physical tools? Mara exhaled. The bow and arrow came early. Gunpowder in the 9th century. By the 20th, we had nuclear weapons, capable of wiping out entire cities. Gasps. Audible and otherwise. Cielinar hissed. You constructed extinction-level weapons for tribal disputes? They were meant to end all wars, Mara said. Mutually assured destruction was a deterrent. Another voice chimed in, soft and sorrowful. You mean, you threatened annihilation to maintain peace? Mara hesitated. Yes. And no. We were scared. It was complex. Professor YYL dimmed the lights. Let us consider this complexity. The hologram shifted. Iconic images flickered. Mushroom clouds. Soldiers in trenches. Civil rights protests. Children in rubble. World leaders shaking hands. Protesters linking arms. Your species does not fit expected conflict resolution models, YYL said. Instead of eliminating violence as a cultural phase, you incorporated it into cycles of innovation. Conflict begets advancement. Advancement begets conflict. Mara frowned. That's not fair. We've done a lot to change. We ended slavery. We created international laws. We have the UN, the United Nations. But your history, YYL replied, is emotional. Your lessons are tied to story and identity, not efficiency. Mara looked around. She saw the alien faces, confused, disturbed, curious. You think we're proud of what we did? She asked. We remember history because it tells us who we were, so we don't go back. The Rex finally spoke, gently. And yet, in simulations and scenarios, humans often revert. Your adaptability is your gift, but also your danger. Maybe, Mara said. Or maybe we're just more honest about how ugly survival can be. The room sat in silence for several seconds. Professor Whale finally spoke. History is not judgment. It is a mirror. Let us all be brave enough to look. The lights brightened. The lecture moved on. But something had shifted. Mara wasn't just a student anymore. She was a case study. And the whole galaxy was watching. The History Simulation Incident. The simulation chamber was a masterpiece of alien technology. An octagonal hall lined with sensory projectors, neural harmonizers, and cognitive dampeners. It allowed full immersion experiences, tapping directly into the participants' perception centers to simulate not just sights and sounds, but emotion, memory, and instinct. Mara Kim stood with the rest of the class in the center of the chamber. Dr. The Rex floated behind her, tentacles resting lightly on his console. Professor YYL's voice echoed from the crystalline control node above. Today's exercise will demonstrate how civilizations resolve crises. You will be placed in a simulated world on the brink of collapse. Limited resources, political instability, and the threat of war loom. Your objective: preserve as much life as possible through cooperation. Mara raised a hand. Any restrictions? No direct violence, YYL replied. You are encouraged to negotiate, innovate, and align. But remember, your decisions will affect the simulation's outcome. Mara nodded. Around her, the other students buzzed with anticipation. Silinar flexed his wings. A trio of aquatic beings calibrated shared thoughts. Then, without warning, the chamber dissolved into light. The world materialized in pieces: dense forests, broken cities, burning skies. Mara found herself standing in a ruined facility with access to a functioning satellite relay and a fractured AI system that still responded to commands. Her interface flickered. Sector 9. Energy node. Limited food and tech. Civilian panic spreading. Government collapsed. Perfect. Chaos. Mara did what no one else did. She sat still and watched. While others sent diplomatic messages and formed councils, she studied the simulation like a general reading the battlefield. First, she hacked the AI systems, reconfiguring them into a local defense network. Then she built a virtual news feed, broadcasting survival instructions laced with subliminal commands for obedience. Not force, control. Within 40 minutes, she had stabilized her region, recruited wandering populations through digital propaganda, and redirected water and power lines to strategic choke points. A rival region threatened her with sanctions. She responded with misinformation. Within 10 minutes, the rival collapsed. Other students tried to convene a planetary peace summit. Mara sent in drones disguised as relief units. The drones carried scanners that mapped leadership centers and emotional stress signatures. Then, using predictive behavior modeling, she seeded dissent in key factions, fracturing unity from within. By the time the summit dissolved, her coalition had tripled in size. At minute 62, she dropped the illusion of democracy and rebranded her region as the Interim Stabilization Authority. She didn't need to win elections. She owned the communication network. At minute 75, she launched psychological operations, fabricating a global existential threat, a plague that did not exist, but that she promised to contain with her technology. Panic. Compliance. Order. By minute 90, she had achieved planetary unification, under emergency martial law, with her as the unelected director of continuity. Then she powered down all simulation communication channels. Checkmate. The simulation faded. The students returned to the real chamber, silent and blinking. Mara stood calmly, breathing evenly. Dr. Therex's console buzzed furiously. Her cortisol levels were elevated, but stable. Pulse steady. Eyes focused. Professor YYL's crystalline form hovered, refracting dimly. Outcome: one governing body. No nuclear war. Minimal casualties. Peace achieved, through total control. A student murmured, "She tricked us." "You all tried to build consensus," Mara said evenly. "I built leverage." Selenar hissed. "You manipulated everyone. You used lies. Fear. And you thought real crises come with honesty and rules?" Dr. Therex's voice was soft but firm. "The exercise was not designed to be won through deception, Cadet Kim." Mara turned toward him. "Then it wasn't designed with humans in mind." Professor Wywell stared at her through 1,000 glittering facets. "What lesson do you believe you taught, Cadet?" Mara didn't flinch. "That survival isn't about perfect choices. It's about imperfect ones made fast, with consequences owned. I saved the world. I just didn't ask for permission." The room was still. Dr. Therex tapped in a final entry. Subject demonstrates extreme strategic improvisation under ambiguous moral constraints. Reinforces thesis: human cognition integrates conflict into ethical reasoning, not separately from it. YWL spoke at last. "This confirms why humans require supervision in historical instruction." Mara bristled. "So what, because I adapted to a broken scenario, I'm the threat?" "No," Wywell said, voice crystalline and cold. "Because you adapted too well." Outside the simulation chamber, as students filed out in silence, some kept their distance. Others whispered. Selenar stared at her like she was a bomb waiting to detonate. Mara ignored them. The Rex walked beside her, unreadable. "You didn't enjoy that simulation," he said. "No," Mara said. "But I knew how to win it." He nodded slowly. "And that is exactly why the others are afraid." What we choose to remember. The Academy courtyard glowed beneath twin moons, casting fractured shadows across the crystalline trees. The wind, scented with Zenthary spice pollen, flowed gently between the towers like a whisper. Mara sat alone at the edge of the reflecting pool, her reflection distorted by ripples she didn't cause. It had been 3 days since the simulation incident. Word had spread. Quietly, but with weight. The human cadet who had dominated the crisis scenario not with empathy or diplomacy, but with manipulation, control, and information warfare. A win, by human standards. A warning, by everyone else's. The stares had changed, from cautious curiosity to subtle unease. Even her few acquaintances avoided eye contact. Selenar, once combative but begrudgingly respectful, now simply ignored her. She picked up a smooth shard of crystal and flicked it into the pool. Dr. Therex approached without sound, as always. His tendrils moved slowly, thoughtfully. "You haven't reported for your emotion stability session." Mara didn't look up. "Didn't think it would help." "It's not meant to help," Therex said gently. "It's meant to monitor." She gave a dry laugh. "Honest, at least." He waited a moment, then settled beside her, his translucent form glowing faintly in the moonlight. "You feel rejected." "I feel like I did exactly what you people asked. Solve the problem. And now they're treating me like I became the problem." Therex's eyes flickered. "You did solve it. Brilliantly. But humans view victory differently. You win through the wound. Others, most species here, avoid being cut at all. So we're too sharp for you." "No. You're too good at surviving sharpness." The Rex paused. "That frightens people. Because they wonder what you'll do with that skill when survival isn't on the line." Mara looked up at the moons. "They study history like it's an autopsy. We study it like a battlefield. Both want answers. But one forgets the blood was real." The Rex turned toward her. "And what do you think history is?" She took a breath. "It's a promise. That the pain meant something. That we bled for more than just survival. That we learned." He nodded slowly. "Then perhaps it's time for you to teach." The next day, Mara requested a student forum, a rare privilege, typically reserved for cultural representatives or guest lecturers. The request raised eyebrows. It was escalated. Reviewed. approved. Not because they trusted her, but because they were curious, nervous enough to listen. The forum hall was packed. Not out of support, but scrutiny. Students filled the tiered seats, professors watched from the back, and administrative recorders floated in silence. The Rex stood by the wall, unreadable. Mara stepped to the podium. No slides. No notes. Just her. "I know what you all think," she began. "That humans are dangerous. That I confirmed every suspicion when I turned your simulation into a power play. That I manipulated you." She let the silence hang. "You're not wrong." A ripple of motion. The Rex narrowed his eyes slightly. "But here's the part you're missing. We know that about ourselves. That's why we build laws. That's why we tell stories. That's why we write history, even when it shames us. Because we don't want to forget what we're capable of, good and bad." She pointed to a floating archive node. "You look at Earth and see war. We see warning. You see conquest. We see cautionary tales. The Holocaust. Hiroshima. Rwanda. We name them. We teach them to children. Because forgetting them is how we repeat them." A serpentine student raised its fronds. "But you still celebrate warriors. Statues. Songs. Films. Because some of them fought to stop worse things. Because in our world, peace was never a default. It was earned. And sometimes, at terrible cost." Silinar stood, mandibles clicking. "So we're just supposed to trust that you've learned?" Mara looked him in the eyes. "No. You're supposed to watch. Just like we do. That's why we remember. That's why no human forgets Auschwitz, or Sarajevo, or Fallujah. Not because we're proud, but because we never want it again." She stepped back. "That's what history is to us. A scar we refuse to let heal. So we don't forget where the knife was." The room sat in stunned quiet. Then, slowly, the Rex tapped his datapad. Updated evaluation. Subject demonstrates high-level introspective conflict resolution. Emotional insight integrated with strategic rationale. Recommendation. Permit continued historical instruction. Professor Weil stood in the back, silent, crystalline arms crossed. But for the first time, Mara saw a glint in his refracted body. Not fear. Not disapproval. Curiosity. Later, as the forum dispersed, the Rex walked with her under the twin moons again. "You didn't ask for forgiveness," he said. "I wasn't sorry," she replied. "I just wanted them to understand why we remember things the way we do." He nodded. "They still may not like it." "They don't have to," she said. "Just like we didn't like living through it." The Rex looked up at the stars. "Perhaps," he said, "the galaxy will learn more from humans than it feared it would." Mara smiled faintly. "Only if they let us into history class."